Well, okay. Welcome into another exciting NBN podcast. Here we have the recap of the draft weekend, the 2021 draft weekend. On this call, we have Kyle, Matt, turn it. We got Matt, we got Kyle, we got Matt on a bike, we got Mega, we got Killer, we got Kid, and you got Kman. All right, guys, who are some of the big winners and from the second round? Some of the teams that really found some gems in the second round that dropped from the first round.
The New Orleans Pelicans, definitely. They got the best offensive, or the most versatile offensive big in this league, in the draft, and that is Sandro Mamukelashvili out of Seton Hall. All right, they won that draft and they got him at 58. So I mean, I'm just saying, Pelicans won that in my opinion, the second round.
So is this the second year in a row where you're boosting a Seton Hall alum that went late in the second?
Okay, this is different though. This is a lot different because no, here's the thing. Miles Powell, as much as I love Miles Powell was a complete joke I was completely joking the entire time when I was talking about his offensive talent and his NBA talent. Because let's be honest, he's a 6'1" point guard. He's a 6'1" shooting guard who can barely dribble the ball up the court. Like, he has no future in the NBA. I love him to death, but he's no future in the NBA. Sandro Mamukelashvili, however, I don't know how he's going to go 58. The only concern about Mamu is his defense, which needs improvement, sure, but it's actually pretty decent. It's not as bad as people think. This is a 6'10" center/power forward who can shoot the ball at a high clip, who can pass it so well. I mean, he's making these insane passes if you ever watch his film that you're thinking a point guard has to make. And the way that he's able to dribble the ball as well for 6'10" is crazy. I mean, the fact that he's going 58 in some drafts, and some drafts going undrafted, and some mocks I'm seeing, it doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah. I think that despite the fact that I don't have the same knowledge base as Matt on Mamu here, I do think that the Pelicans had a pretty good second round. They picked up him, Austin Reeves, and did they have a third pick? Yeah, Isaiah Ty. Yeah, three good players, and I think that the thing about this draft is that with how everything has been this past year, I really do think that there's going to be a lot of sleepers, more so than in a usual year. I also think Orlando had a pretty good draft. They picked up Sam Hauser, Charles Bassey, and then they also selected Rokas Jokubaitis before trading them to me. So
they also got Greg Brown.
Oh yeah, so I think that they had a pretty solid group. Some interesting names in there.
I like the Spurs second round. At 34, they got JT Thor. 36, they got some guy whose name I'm not going to try and pronounce. And 54, they picked up David Johnson.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the 36. I think that picking up Blienberg 36 was definitely the biggest reach of the second round.
You wanted him.
I did want him, but like I wanted him at like 58. If I'm being honest.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
At 36, especially when you still have names like BJ Boston and Rokas, Charles Bassey, Philip Petrusev, who's interesting. When there's still names on the board, those names on the board, I'm not sure whether taking him was the best move, but hey, I'm rooting for the kid.
You just mentioned Petrusev, and that's actually a really interesting pick. I honestly believe that is just one of the best
pickups. He's a weird type of prospect that we've seen prospects play in the EuroLeague and do well in the EuroLeague and then not be able to do well in the NBA. But he has played at a high level in both the EuroLeague and also in college when he played for Gonzaga before moving to EuroLeague last year. This is a prospect, and I am not on my computer right now, so I don't know his complete stats. I think he averaged 26 points per game in the EuroLeague with 10.4 rebounds per game, or something like that. He has to develop some parts of his game, but I mean, I just really like that pick. And I'm kind of surprised a player like that would drop that far. And as you were saying earlier, this is kind of a draft where there are going to be a lot more diamond in the rough kind of players, in my opinion, because of the weird year that we had with COVID. So that's why I think him, Mamu, you're talking about Charles Bassey. I also like Charles Bassey. I think there will be some good players like that are falling in this draft that I don't think should.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
So just to he played in the ABA league, which is the Adriatic League in Croatia, and he scored.
I was just saying EuroLeague, just like whatever, but like yeah.
Well, it's not the main.
It's not the EuroLeague, but like
yeah,
it's your league in Europe.
It is a league in Europe, but it's not the main top league. So we don't know exactly how far high we want to rank it, but he did score 23.6 points a game on 57% from the field, 41% from the 3-point line, 7.5 rebounds.
Yeah.
Oh man, I got wrong on it. Damn.
And he was putting up great numbers at Gonzaga the year before, 17 points a game, 56% from the field as well. He wasn't shooting as nearly as well from 3-point line, so that jump in the 3-point shooting is very big for him. Whether or not that can translate will be huge, obviously.
Exactly. And I mean, this is a player that, like, if he didn't, because there was a very big shock. If anybody was like paying attention to college basketball, it was a pretty big shock when he learned the news that he's going to go to Europe next year instead of staying another year at Gonzaga. Because, I mean, first of all, if they had him last year, if that Gonzaga team had him, that would probably be one of, if not the best college basketball team of all time, you could argue. But he was probably going to be a first-team All-American if he stayed at Gonzaga last year, but instead decided to take his talents to Croatia and did a very good job in Croatia, as you were talking about developing his 3-point game.
Yeah, definitely. I think that a lot of the EuroLeague guys this year. We talked a lot about Şengün in the first round, but also, a lot of the EuroLeague guys this year are really interesting, and it's going to be really. I think that they might be the storyline out of this draft. 5 years down the line is that, there's a lot of really promising Euro guys, and I think that they're definitely going to be a group.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, I was talking about earlier when we were doing the original draft combine, when we talked about the first round, and I was kind of talking about how much I didn't really like those prospects from like 20 to like 30. I wasn't a big fan of them. I'm much more of a fan of the prospects that are going out later in the second than the prospects that are going right after the lottery in the end of the first in this draft.
Yeah, and I do think that we saw. I do think that we saw some teams agree with you. I mean, with the selection of Bones Highland and Josh Christopher were a little bit reaching. I mean, I know a lot of people here value them pretty highly, but they are a little bit reaching off from the consensus boards. And so I think that a lot of people do agree that there are a lot, like from like 2020 on, everybody's list is like wildly different.
Yeah, it is. And I don't think we've seen a draft like this in a long time, where there are kind of players that you could go anywhere. And it was kind of like that too after 5. Like after 5 in the draft, there were like 10 prospects that could go number 6. And
Şengün was what
necessarily
was all over the place. Like,
yeah.
There were some mocks that were putting him down in the 20s. Even one that I saw that actually had him at 31. It was I think it was NBA Draft Room had Şengün at 31, and I couldn't believe it.
I mean, it's weird. Like Josh Giddey's another one of those prospects too that I keep on looking at, and I'm like, because I saw somebody, I don't know what I was reading today, but I saw something that was like, yeah, he's like going like 30th, and I'm like, what? Like. But Josh Giddey's one of those prospects. There's a bunch of different prospects this year. And as you're saying, I think the international prospects will end up being the storyline of this draft. I tend to completely agree with that point.
So we just spoke about some of the main winners, but and I know some Mega brought up a couple of the stretches. Who are the really big losers, if there were any really in the second round? Or we can't really deem them losers right now, but people just teams that just you don't think they did a good job in that pick?
I mean, you were talking about the Magic. I like the other picks, but I think that Sam Hauser pick at 48, in my opinion, is a bit of a reach. He's a very good shooter, sure, but that defense cannot be ignored. He has some terrible defense. And those, I remember that Marquette team, it was him and his brother and Marcus Howard. That was one of the worst defensive teams I've ever seen. And I can't really ignore that fact of the defensive game is just not there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that was definitely a little bit of a reach, but I don't feel like it's one that could spoil the rest of what Orlando did. I think that I think that like a lot of the draft, like it was pretty balanced. You'd see somebody with a pick that's a little bit of a reach, but there's nobody that really sticks out just from looking over that they just consistently were reaching or picking guys that I don't feel like can be good. It's a lot of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but like ultimately still gains.
I tend to agree with you, and I think there's like I'm looking at the draft right now, and I'm thinking there's some picks I just like. There's the Joel Ayayi pick, the 35th pick of the draft. I just really like that pick because in my opinion, he's a lot higher in my draft board than other. And he ended up going in this draft. You also have people like Ayo Dosunmu going 33. That was one that I was like, what? I was very confused about. So I tend to agree. There's not many picks that I'm just like, oh, that's a bad pick. I think everything is like pretty balanced in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So thoughts on then? Oh, sorry. Continue.
Sorry, no, continue.
I just wanted to ask if we're sort of done with talking specifically about the second round, we can just talk about the whole draft in general. Once like going deeper into what we sort of touched on in the post draft on Saturday, the big winners and big losers of the draft weekend.
Yeah, definitely. I think for the winners, you kind of have to look at I really think that a lot of people won. I think that Charlotte with that Şengün pick has the potential to be a foundational piece, especially on a team that I feel can really showcase his talents. By putting the ball in his hands a lot. What does everybody else think?
I really agree, to be honest. I think there's like some other picks. Like I won't say because I am on Phoenix, but I will say like for Phoenix, for example, you could call I would call Phoenix the winner because they got exactly what they needed, which was a point guard. Or you could also talk about how I think when you're talking about winners, you can't really talk about you can't talk about any team except talking about 76ers just because of how many picks they had. One of them is bound to be a good pick, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like unless they strike out on literally all of those picks, which I don't have because they had so many. There's no possible feasible way that they don't end up being a good team with those picks.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like even if they do end up miraculously striking out on all of those guys, they did select a lot of high risk, high reward guys. So honestly, I'm not even going to call them losers, even if, one out of only like a handful of those prospects turn out because of the way they ran this draft. It's very high risk, high potential. A lot of it is going to depend on where these guys go in real life, which is obviously info that none of us could have. And so I feel like the Sixers did have a very good draft. Thank you. Looking at it, I think that the Bulls had an interesting draft. I liked their trade. I believe they did a trade with they traded to get Davion Mitchell, right?
Yeah, they traded down to Memphis.
Yeah.
Memphis moved up to get Franz Wagner. This is one really move that I think both teams are really happy with how it worked out, because Memphis spoke with Wonder actually spoke quite a bit on Saturday how much he really wanted Franz Wagner on the franchise and going forward. And Davion really fits a position similarly that was talked about earlier about for Phoenix filling a point guard position. Chicago wants to fill that point guard position, and especially for them building forward, they want to balance that. Like, they want to improve, obviously, on this play-in performance. They don't want to take a step back too much. They want someone that can contribute immediately, and Davion Mitchell is that to an nth degree, if he can translate well. And so they got their guy, and they were able to trade down, get another asset. They did a good job in this draft, I think.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean that was definitely a risk on their part, because I do know that there was some interest from a few teams higher than for Mitchell, but it ended up paying off.
It did. It definitely did. And I mean, there are some picks that I'm just like, I'm very happy with. If you're one of those teams, I mean, the pick of, and we were talking about the second earlier, but we'll talk about the first right now. I think, I forgot, Boop Knight even went to 76ers, which is a great pickup. I think the pickup, the most interesting one in my opinion, which I think is, I don't know how it happened. Golden State Warriors getting Scotty Barnes plus Marcus Smart, Marvin Bagley, and Harry Giles, all for Klay Thompson. I think that is going to end up being the most highway robbery trade that there ever will be. I'm looking at that. You're getting Scotty Barnes, who this is my opinion. I mean, you're getting Scotty Barnes, who is a very high potential kind of prospect, who has some incredible defensive ability, and the fact that he has to develop his offensive game, sure, but I mean that defensive ability is there already. You're getting Marcus Smart, who is a great guard, and
Whoa.
I mean,
Are you saying highway robbery for the Warriors in that trade?
yeah, for the Warriors won that trade.
I mean, I kind of got to I feel like that trade is going to come down to what it does to Stephen Curry's free agency, because he's only got a year left on his deal, and
True.
he's seen all of the core of the Dynasty Warriors traded away for what looks to be a rebuilding team. I know that I feel like any trade which lowers your chance, like if they end up managing to re-sign Curry to a long-term deal this year, I do feel like I might agree with you, because obviously we don't know how well Thompson will come back from injury, and there's a lot of unknowns around that. But if that doesn't end up happening, then I do think that it's going to be a very big question mark over whether the move to flip him was the right idea.
I think also you just pointed out the whole Klay Thompson injury thing. I mean, that's the really big elephant in the room for them.
Yeah.
If like OKC, that's sort of the best case for Klay Thompson to have this recovery in our league, because OKC can build around him at least for the next year. We know that his overall is not going to drop that much. I don't expect him to play that much even this upcoming year. We'll really see it in the year after, and that'll be whether or not OKC can be competitive in the next couple of years, because that's what it looks like. This is a move that you would think they would want to be starting to be competitive now, or are they just looking to cash in on when he's low and then try and sell big? Like I still don't really understand the process of thinking from OKC's perspective, but they still won the trade from, even though just because they got Klay Thompson for me. There's a lot of me thinking I'm thinking, why did you want to do this in the first place, though? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I tend to. I do see what you're saying. My eyes are that he's 31. He's coming off of 2 bad injuries. I usually with players like this who come off 2 major injuries and are starting to age. He's starting to head into those twilight years of his career. I think honestly, I just don't see him going back to what he was anywhere near where he was before, which is sad. But I mean, we will see, and I think we'll see what OKC does. What are they going to do? Are they going to basically shut down both of them? We were joking in the draft where they were like, they're going to play Clay at center, and they're going to send Shea to Paris, and that's what they're going to do for a year. But I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do, and I just tend to like that Golden State trade on Golden State side a little bit more because you're getting Scotty Barnes. And again, you were talking about how they need Steph Curry to re-sign, but I don't know. I feel like they can get Steph Curry to re-sign. I just think Marvin Bagley is one of the most interesting players in the NBN, the NBA, just in general. I mean, he's still 22 years old. He hasn't lived up to his potential, sure. But here's the but. I still feel like he can get that back, and he's still going to be able to do a pretty decent job in the NBA if he finds the right team. Because, I mean, there are some trade rumors for Marvin Bagley in the real-life NBA, and then in the NBN, that could impact his performance too if he finds the right team.
I mean, fair. And in the real world, he is on the Kings, who are not exactly known for their development. But I do wonder. I mean, for anybody that's been following Bagley, I mean, there has been a lot of words. He has a very loud and vocal camp around him.
Yes.
And part of me wonders if that's going to hinder his development in the long term rather than help it.
Yeah. It's one of those big what ifs, and I think both of these teams are taking equal risks in that aspect. Where you're taking, I feel like Scotty Barnes isn't that much of a risk. Scotty Barnes isn't my favorite prospect, to be honest. I know he was Chuck. He was Chuck's favorite. He loved Scotty Barnes. I don't particularly love Scotty Barnes, but I don't hate him, and I think because I think he has a good future as an amazing defender. I think that's easy to tell. It's just whether or not he's going to be able to get that offensive game to a high point. What I think I don't know. I mean, I'm just looking at this, and you're taking those risks. You're taking that Marvin Bagley risk. You're even taking that Harry Giles risk, because people forget that Harry Giles is still 23, and he had a good season before getting injured at Portland last year, if I remember correctly. He was doing decent before he went to Portland, and then I don't know if he got injured or just did not get any playing time. Nonetheless, I feel like he can still develop as well.
I do know I do know a decent amount about Harry Giles. He was shut down for a lot in the season with I believe a knee injury.
Yeah, he got hurt and then never came back from that injury. We talked about that.
Yeah. But I do think that with Giles, a lot of he does concern me a little bit, because a lot of his value came from the potential, and I don't know how much this season has impacted that.
Very true. Very true. This is a we'll see pick. Give it 1 or 2 years. We'll see. I honestly think that the Golden State Warriors will end up winning this trade, but we will see what happens.
Yeah.
So if Golden State Warriors are one of the teams that came out surprisingly a winner, who are some of the teams that came out surprised as losers of the weekend overall? Teams that just, you have giant giant question marks around their picks.
That's an interesting one. I think in terms of their picks only, I think that a player like the Bulls, not with the Davion Mitchell pick, but with the Josh Primo pick, is the one that I'm just like, what? Like, Josh Primo should not go with the 25th pick, in my opinion. I feel like his only... I was talking about he's a player that's like, he's 2 years away from being 2 years away.
Oh, boy.
I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that Josh Primo pick.
I mean, if I'm looking... I mean, the pick that I'm looking at that really strikes me as a little bit risky is Memphis's 12th pick of Usman Garuba.
Yeah, okay, that one too. I forgot about that, and yeah, that's, yeah.
Like,
I mean, I don't love him, but I think he's gonna be solid regardless. He's
Kid,
pretty
we
safe.
can't hear you. Can you speak up or turn your mic up?
Oh, for real? Okay, 1 second.
He'll be
But
back.
with Usman, I do wonder. Like, I like him. I think he might have a good career in the NBA. But I don't know how well his skill set is going to transfer to 2K. I mean, he's a 6'8", he's a 6'8" center. He's slow, doesn't really have that great of an offensive game. I don't know how that's going to translate to 2K.
I completely agree. That's why, and even in the NBA, I just like if Usman Garuba goes 12th in the real NBA draft, I'm also gonna be like, what? Like, his defensive game's there. He has to really develop an offensive game, and like you were saying, I don't know. Some people are more high than me. I'm not very high on him in terms of like I feel like he'll be in the league, sure, but I don't think he'll be anything special.
Kid, is your mic working now?
Yeah, I think so. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Better.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't that high on the Garuba pick, but at the very least, he's really like a safe prospect. He's gonna probably I think he's one of the 5 most likely players in this league to at least carve out some kind of role in the NBA for a long period of time because he's just so good at. I don't know. Yeah, I get the concerns about 2K, and that's why I had him like late first round on my draft board. But like as far as teams with several selections goes, I was actually pretty high on the Grizzlies as a whole. Like the Gruber pick, it's whatever, but I think Moody and Wagner both really fit kind of the makeup of their team. I'm pretty high on both of them as prospects. I do think they're both just very safe prospects with a decent amount of upside as well, and kind of would be good fits next to Ja Morant. And then even in the second round, like in the late 40s and the 50s, I think they ended up with Joe Wieskamp. He dropped a little bit.
Ooh, I liked that pickup as well.
Yeah, I like that pickup as well.
Like he's a great shooter. His testing numbers at the combine were really like he doesn't play very athletically. It's weird. Like he plays kind of stiff, not very laterally quick, but he's a great athlete apparently. From what we saw at the combine, and then Santi Aldama, like he was just dominant at the pace. Like I think if you look at Mike Muscala when he was at Bucknell, I think he's in the same conference that Aldama was, and Aldama looked a little bit more dominant, I would say, than Muscala did back in the day. So I don't know. I think in the late second, he's a guy who certainly could end up having an NBA role. So really, all 4 of those 5 picks, with the exception of the Gruber pick, I was pretty high on. Like if you compare the Sixers haul to the Grizzlies haul, just compared to, as far as what their team makeup is, I think I prefer what the Grizzlies did with their draft to what the Sixers did.
Just to ask everyone that was low on Garuba, if he were to go like around 17 or 18, because honestly, he was our Sixers pick for 16, I think, or 17. That was like our genuine draft order for him. We really liked Garuba. We wanted to get him a little earlier than where we saw him being picked up in the early 20s, low teens. We wanted to get him a little just before we thought he would go in real life. Do you think that even that is a little too high, just in terms of just so we can get a gauge of how high Garuba went?
Yeah, I honestly think that's a little bit. I honestly think that's too high too. I understand that a lot more than the 12, but in my opinion, that's a little bit too high still.
I go 12 in real life. Like that's certainly not beyond the realm of possibility that he goes late lottery in real life.
Yeah, I just wouldn't like it if he does. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, I think Kid makes a good point though, because we saw the same thing in Garuba, and that he's quite assuredly going to be a role player in this league. Unless he gets to really hit hard with injuries, I don't see that career even as a role player running out very soon. I think of him as a bench player for the next at least 5 years. Even if he's getting bad injuries or just never improves, he's going to be a role player, I think, at least for the next 5 years, if not 10 years.
He's probably the second best defender in this draft, behind
Yeah,
Mobley.
Yeah. This draft is filled with very good defenders, though. I mean, we
it
talked.
is.
We've got Davion Mitchell, who was pretty good. A lot of guys.
Trey Murphy as well.
Trey Murphy. And even some of the undrafted guys. I mean, I know we haven't really talked about them, but I was really happy with my pickup of Yves Pons. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, yes, Fonz. That was a good pickup, in my opinion.
Thanks. Yeah, but I really like his defensive potential. He's an interest. Like, I feel like there's a lot of really solid defensive players in this draft, and I think that there's a lot of really solid defensive players who will translate better to the defense that 2K can do.
Yeah. Another one that like went undrafted that I was actually kind of surprised about, that I actually really like, McKinley Wright out of Colorado. I actually like that pickup, and he signed with the Hawks. And the Hawks just won the championship in NBN, and I think they're picking up a decent prospect that could probably develop a little bit more, and I think is going to get drafted in real life in the second round.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, go.
I mean, you just talked about undrafted. We can just move on then to undrafteds in general. Who are some of the other signings that are other undrafted players that are still available, and the ones that are being signed right now that are like the really good gems?
So we were talking about, Luka Garza is the most interesting one, in my opinion. Luka Garza, that offensive game's there. We all know Naismith winner last year, almost won the Naismith the year before. If Obi Toppin wasn't a player, he would have won it. His offensive game's there. His three-point shot's there. He has all of the tools to be a good big in the league. But then there's the one glaring weakness, and you can't not look at it, and that's his defense. He is probably one of the worst defensive bigs I have ever seen.
Yeah.
And he really, really has to develop that if he wants a spot in the NBA. But I'm not sure if he will. But if he does, this is a player that can actually be a very, very good undrafted free agent.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of I put a lot of stock into Sam Vecini's big board, and out of all of the undrafted players, he was ranked the highest at 57. I do think he's definitely the most interesting undrafted player. What kind of deal do you think he's going to end up getting?
I'm going to say, I mean, we offered him. We offered him. I think we're offering him, and like I'm thinking like a 2+1 deal for him with like 1.6 mil. I could see something like that. That's what I could see.
Yeah.
The other prospect that I kind of like, Jay Hoff out of Virginia, is a very interesting prospect as well. He's played for Virginia. He has the Tony Bennett factor. And if we were talking earlier in the draft about there are types of coaches that produce good talent, not like star players, but good talent. I talked about Jay Wright at Villanova, Tony Bennett here at Virginia is one of them. I think Tom Izzo as well at Michigan State was the other one we were talking about. Where at Virginia, I feel like he's going to be he can actually play pretty well. His 3-point percentage was pretty decent at Virginia. His defense is there because it's Virginia, so he is a good defender. His 2-point percentage was like amazing. It was like I forgot what it was. But he was very good. I think he was like a 60% from the field, and he's a very efficient player. And I feel like you can kind of translate that into the NBA because he's 7'1" too. Like I think he's a player that could translate pretty well into the NBA and the NBN, especially the NBN, which is a league that really likes tall players. Yeah,
I think Raekwon Gray could also be a very interesting one. The Cleveland Cavaliers picked him up on a 1+1, and there are some questions about him for sure. But he's very interesting. He's 6'8", which isn't amazing for the NBN, but he had a pretty solid career, and
from what I hear, his passing is pretty underrated, and I think that he could be a very interesting prospect. Yeah.
I tend to agree. He's interesting, and then the Florida State prospects are another one of those that's like they can produce pretty solid talent. So I tend to agree. I think that's honestly it in terms of like the player. I think Jericho Sims is another one that's like a pretty interesting one. Jericho Sims is out of, oh my god, I want to say Texas. Am I right? Yeah, he's out of Texas. He was pretty decent for Texas last year. He was supposed to be a lot better, which is the problem, and I think that's why he dropped. He's also a senior, but he's, I think, a 6'10 center with like, okay, I'm pulling the stats for now. 6'10 center with a 7'3" wingspan. He can dribble. He can rebound the ball pretty well. He can finish the ball pretty well. He had a 69 percent field goal percentage last year. And I think, I don't know, it's just a big man kind of doing that thing. Just big men in NBN. They like that in 2K. So
Yeah.
I'd say I'd definitely like Sims more than Garza and Huff. Like Sims, he's very versatile defensively. Like he's maybe a top 10 defender in this league. Like he's really switchable. Like he has the wingspan, he has a lot of lateral quickness, so he can really step out and guard the perimeter. And he's pretty good. He's just like your typical kind of rim runner type of guy.
yeah.
Luca, but with a little, maybe a little more defensive versatility than the normal rim running kind of guy. So, but he's just a little limited on offense, but still good pick and roll finisher as far as I know. Not going to pretend to be an expert, but I don't know. Luca, I don't even trust his offensive game that much. I think he's not going to be nearly as effective in the post. I think he was a 70% free throw shooter in college. I don't know how well he's even going to translate as just like a stretch 4, stretch 5. And obviously defense is just terrible. Like it's almost makes him a non-starter for me to begin with. So I just not high on him. I think J Huff has a little more upside, just because of his size and he's a little quicker. Not saying much. He's really not that quick.
He's not very quick.
Not very stout either. I think he'll get bullied inside. He definitely can't really be very switchable and guard the.
He is 7'1" though.
He is.
Like there's just like a thing with 7-footers. Like if you're a 7-footer, you automatically have a better chance of doing well in the NBA and the NBN as a whole.
Yeah, and I don't, like offensively, I don't see him being that much more in a spot up shooter at the next level. So
Yeah,
I like Steve though. He's probably of those 3 bigs the one I'm highest on. Chris Smith was out of UCLA. He's kind of a guy you forget about with the tournament run that they had. He missed it because he played like 8 games last year before he went out for the season. But yeah, he was kind of their star player at the start of the year, and then he got hurt. But
he was supposed to be like an All-American before he got injured, which was like he was. That's another pickup again, like you were talking about. Is very underrated.
Yeah, he's 6'8", 7-foot wingspan. I think he's at the very least going to be a decent shooter. I think he can be a good shooter potentially. Pretty good free throw shooter in college. I think he was pretty high recruit in college. I mean, he went to UCLA, so this would be a pretty decent recruit or decently rated recruit. Yeah, he was the guy we were going to take at 56 if Aaron Henry was not on the board. I don't know if Smith will get drafted in real life necessarily. I know there's some concerns about the injury, but he's probably my favorite undrafted free agent. I think the Cavs were lucky to get him without any contest from any other team.
Yeah, I tend to agree. The other pick that I'm looking at that I actually really liked, and I'm surprised he dropped as far as he did, with the 48. No, what was it? The 44th pick. The Bulls got Jeremiah Robinson Earl out of Villanova. I like that pick a lot. I had him a lot higher than 44 on my draft board. I had him going very early second. And I think he's a very good player. Again, he has developed that defense, but he's 6'9". He can shoot the 3 pretty well. His assist turnover ratio is really good as well. And I mean, he's only 20 years old too, so he can develop even more, in my opinion. I just like that pick.
Definitely. Speaking about that, I did want to ask who everybody thinks the biggest. We've discussed this a little bit, but I want to get everybody's like formal opinion. Who do we think the biggest sleepers are of the draft, just in general?
I'll go mine first. So Jeremiah Robinson Earl, Charles Bassey, Philip Putrasev, and then Sandro Mamlakilishvili. Those are mine.
Definitely. I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I really do think that that Rokas falling to 50 was a pretty big shock. I mean,
That is a pretty big shock, yeah.
I mean, I've seen him mocked in the late first.
I
in
have
some
him too,
places.
yeah.
Getting him at 50, and especially for me, I feel like personally, the fact that I managed to get him for just a future second round pick, I'm really happy about that deal, and I think that he's probably not going to come over this year, but next year or 2 years down the line, I think that he can be really effective.
Draft-
I'm going to
sorry.
I gotta toot my own horn, and just to defend Neemias Keita, he put up some ridiculous numbers at Utah State, and I know a lot of people like Charles Bassey. We did too. We just like Neemias Keita better just because of his with the size that he offers, being a true center and being 7 foot tall, 245. He's a big player. We're confident in his ability to transition to the NBA. I know a lot of people were down on his numbers, I guess, but I don't know. I'm seeing massive numbers and I'm seeing great production. And when I saw from the highlights and videos, he could look to be a very good rotational player in the NBA.
I actually want to say, because I actually completely forgot about Neemias Keita for a second, and I do prefer him over Charles Bassey. I mean, he was putting up better numbers, in my opinion. He's putting up better numbers. Wasn't as good as a scorer, but was better on almost everything else at Utah State, which is in a much better conference than the CUSA, which is not that good of a conference.
Is it?
Yeah, I would say Utah.
It's pretty comparable.
I would say it's better. I would say it. I mean, you have teams like San Diego State in there as well.
I mean, that's Mountain West, right?
Yeah.
I like the
My-
Mountain West.
I do like the Mountain West, in my opinion. I think
Yeah,
it's
you got
actually
Colorado State, Utah State, San Diego State, Utah State, Colorado State, Boise State, Nevada, Fresno State, UNLV, Wyoming, San Jose State, New Force, and Air Force in New Mexico.
New Force.
New Force.
New Force.
No, honestly, looking at these records, Air Force and New Mexico should combine into one team.
No, but I honestly think it's way better, in my opinion. Mountain West is way better. It was fun watching Mountain West. If anybody watched Mountain West basketball, because they were sometimes on after Big East games, so I'd kind of watch them sometimes, and they were fun to watch sometimes. And I enjoyed Mountain West basketball, and it's a lot better than CUSA, in my opinion. It's a lot better. And the fact that he was putting up better numbers at a better conference, his assists, he is averaging 3.2 assists per 36 for a 7-footer, is very good. 3.3 blocks per game, like, damn.
Yeah, see, that was the number for me. When I saw, and especially that it's not an outlier. If anything, the year before was a down year because he had 2.4 in his freshman year. So even the field goal percentage numbers, his points per game have risen. His field goal percentage has stayed about the same, a slight dip this season, but this was a career high in points per game. So I just banked on that. Higher minutes, also career high in rebounds. I really like what he offers, and the assists as well. That shows me something that he can actually stay on the court in an offensive system and make passes as well, make those drop passes. Having that ability, that knowledge set is going to be huge as to whether or not he can be a rotational player or maybe even move into the starting lineup one day.
I honestly completely forgot about him, and yeah, he's definitely a sleeper for me. Like, I just like when you were talking about it, I was like, oh my god, like I've watched a few of his games, and he was very, very good at Utah State, a team that, in my opinion, another one of those teams that really got hurt when 2020, when the 2020 season NCAA tournament got canceled. So I feel like they were going to go on a major run because that team had some talent. But that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like that pick.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to speak up on the draft in general? We got any last words?
Go Suns.
I think my favorite, I don't know if they've been mentioned all, but my favorite draft of any team this year was the Pistons, who obviously got Cade Cunningham. But it's like the Pistons last year. It's like they followed it up with another really good value pick last year in RJ Hampton at like 24, I think.
Yeah, I like that one as well.
Yeah.
Like this year they got Cade obviously, but then I think they got Trey Murphy,
Which I like that pick.
at
Yeah.
20. Like he's starting to like creep into the late lottery conversation. And I think he's really good for the kind of players they're building around as a complement to them. Just because he can, like, they don't need him to create a bunch. They can just have him shoot and defend. When they have Cade and when they have Anthony Edwards and Christian Wood, and then they got Trey Mann at 29. Like he's a guy. I know his stock's dropped a little bit this year, but I think 29 is pretty solid value for him. He definitely could be just a really good scorer off the bench is probably what he projects as for their team. So, and obviously they got Cade, which is a heist in and of itself.
Yeah.
And then even second round, they got Aaron Wiggins at pick 57. Like I think there are other players in this draft who are maybe a slightly better version of what Aaron Wiggins brings to the table. Like he's kind of inconsistent, but at the end of the day, he's still just pretty like solid 3-and-D kind of wing.
Yeah.
So pretty good pick for 57 in my opinion.
Another one I was looking at 50 at what was it? 53 with Scotty Lewis. Another one. Scotty Lewis is an interesting prospect. I think 53 with Scotty Lewis is a very interesting pick. We'll see how that ends up though.
All right. Looks like that's going to wrap it up for us on this draft podcast. That's going to be all. Thank you for listening and tuning in. Thank you to Matt, Mega, Killer, Kid, and Kyle as well, who was here earlier. Cheers.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
See ya.
There's everyone.
Yep. See y'all.